Marilyn Turkovich, the director of the Charter for Compassion. And this particular webinar is being recorded. So if you wanted to refer friends back to it, we'll get out a notice for the link to the recorded webinar so that you can share it. We're very pleased again to be working with Imam Malik, who's the founding chairman of Sound Vision Foundation in Chicago, and a producer of an educational program that's aired every single day in Chicago. And we have been working with Imam Malik for the past several years, and it's been really a pleasure. And for people who don't know him, he has been selected 4 times as one of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world, a list that was compiled in cooperation with Georgetown University. And he has excelled in building alliances and coalitions among Muslims as well as non-Muslims. And Imam Malik has served as the past chair of the Council for the Parliament of World Religions, and that's the first time that we had an opportunity to work with him. And most recently, we have worked with him on the One American Registry, One American Coalition, an organization that upholds the US Constitution and opposes the Muslim ban and registry. He is also the chair of the Burma Task Force USA, a group that has been formed a number of years ago to stop the genocide of the Rohingya Muslim minority group and the persecution of other ethnic groups. So I am going to turn this over now to Imam Malik. We will have a chat box, so please feel free. If you don't know where it is, if you would take your cursor and go down to the bottom part of the screen, you'll see 2 options. One is a chat box that will allow you to communicate directly with Imam Malik or even among yourselves. And there's also, to the left of the chat box, you'll see a question and answer box. So we'll make certain that any questions that you have will be directed to Imam Malik. Malik, welcome, and we're very pleased to have you today.
Well, thank you so much, Madeline, and happy to always work with you. What you don't know about Madeline is, other than leading the Charter of Compassion, she's also co-chair of One America Coalition, which she mentioned we initiated. So I will share with you a PowerPoint presentation which will explain to you some of the things we have been doing. But it will have 3 elements. One is what's happening currently, a bit of background, and what we can do about that. So I hope, any question which you have, you will write down and we'll attend to it. So in the last, in the 2 weeks of September and October, 60% of all Rohingya villages, as you can see in this satellite image, were destroyed. And few were added in another 15 days. So in 30 days, 284 villages, 6% of all of this indigenous community in Burma were gone. Many people think this is something happened in the past. Actually, just last 2 months. And just yesterday, there were 7 reports of attacks and destruction of Rohingya villages. Several thousand are still trapped and trying to get out. So overall impact is not only people say 600,000, I would say 1 million people. 500,000 or so is still stuck in Burma. 120,000 were in concentration camps for the last 5 years. And now there are 100,000 in new camps. And rest of them are running around here and there in beaches and things of this nature. And more than 1 million are in Bangladesh. 600,000 are the recent arrivals in last couple of months. 90,000 arrived actually beginning of this year. And they already had over there somewhere 300 to 500,000. No one knows the exact numbers because in Burma, they didn't want to count Rohingyas in census. And in Bangladesh, they're just coming in and there is no proper system of counting because the United Nations UNHCR is designated to take care of refugees, but they are not allowed to register as refugees. So there are no proper accounting. So entrance point, they're keeping an eye, and that's how they know how many came in last couple of months. But this thing was going on for a while. As you can see in this, in 1978, this thing started, and in a big way, 300,000 were thrown out. Then 192, then 2012, then 2016, and now in 2017. And each time, Rohingyas were the blames. This is an interesting thing about genocide, that normally victims are blamed by those people who are destroying them. 7 Nobel laureates have signed this statement. What Rohingyas are facing is a textbook case of genocide in which an entire indigenous community is being systematically wiped out by the Burmese government. So the background of this information, Rohingyas are indigenous people. They are dark-skinned people of Burma living in their ancestral land. They didn't come from anywhere. They were always citizens. Until recently, they voted and elected their own representatives. Actually, the current parliament, which everyone hailed as the return of democracy, is the only parliament where Rohingya representation is not there. Most Rohingyas are Muslims, but there are some same ethnic and racial background who are Hindus. Buddhists also are on both sides of the border. There are Buddhist citizens, a large number of them actually, inside Bangladesh where all these refugee camps are, and with Buddhist temples and all that. So this is a professor and Nobel laureate in economics. He says that Rohingyas did not come to Burma, but Burma came to Rohingyas. And that's the background that 300 years they were in independent states and Muslim, Buddhist, and Hindus living together without any problems. Then Mughal conquered them, and then Burma for the first time in history occupied this area in 1785. That's what this professor is referring to, that Rohingya did not come to Burma, but Burma came to Rohingya. It became part of British India. When they divided it up, they landed in this situation. So this image which you see on the left side is a satellite image of a village called Thulatuli. Burmese government says that in the whole operation in which 284 villages were destroyed, only 400 people died. Incorrect. Just in this village, I personally investigated, 1,700 people died there. And this image which you see of elderly person, I met him. His name is Badi, and he is a former mayor of the same village. His son was murdered there along with 1,700 other people. The way it happened is that the current mayor now, the village has 3,000, used to have 3,000 Muslims and about 300 Buddhists. Now, it is not about Buddhism and Islam. There's nothing like that, but it has a racial component to it. So now that they are not citizens, they cannot vote. So the mayor which got elected is a Buddhist because only Buddhists can vote. You can call it a level of apartheid and whatnot. So he told them, don't worry about it. next close by villages are being burned and all that, but nothing will happen to you. Just your houses will be burned down, but nobody will attack you. And he assured them, so these people did not run away until September 30th, 8 a.m. in the morning. Mir Badi told us that 8 a.m. military helicopters landed and soldiers started attacking them and killing and burning houses, so they all ran. If you can see that, as my arrow is moving, there is a river here. Looks a tiny river from the satellite images, but this is hilly area. So this is pretty fast moving river. You just simply cannot cross it very easily. And it goes here all the way. It surrounds the village from three sides. So when they ran from here, they ended up in this area. And that's where the real massacre of people took place. From morning until 7 until afternoon, women and men were separated. Women were asked to stand. This water is a river, but small branches doesn't have a fast-flowing river. That's where women were asked to stay in water up to their neck. And then in the late afternoon, 7-8 soldiers will come, take 7-8 women with them to a temple where they'll be raped. And of course, most of the men either were able to run away or they were killed. Majority of the people were killed there. So this is a young man. He's a 10-year-old. His name is Noor Muhammad. When I talk to people over there, that's me on the left side in white shirt, more people will gather. So when I was talking to him, I was not talking to somebody else, but he was standing there with somber face. So I asked him, where is his hut? Hut, because that's what they got, the bamboos and some plastic. And he told me he has none. He just hangs around on the roadside. So I asked him where his parents are. He told me his parents have been murdered. And I asked him about his brothers and sisters. He said, I had 4 sisters and 3 brothers. All of them are murdered. Then he said, do you have any memory of them? I thought maybe photo or something. So he showed me on his cell phone a photo of 3 little children. I said, who they are? I said, it turned out those are children of his elder brother, who were also murdered along with their mom. So this person has nobody immediate left alive from the same town of Tolatoli. This young man, his name is Numan. When I ask how many people saw anybody killed, most of the time 40% people raise their hands. So he raised hand reluctantly. I asked him who he saw. He said, I ran away and hid in the rice field, and he saw his uncle being killed. And this woman was released by Doctors Without Borders. She was raped and hit and thrown in her own hut, which was set ablaze. She was able to run out, and other villagers who saw her laying unconscious brought her after 4 days of walk to Bangladesh. So rape is being used, and we have a map of, wherever we have the report of rape. United Nations actually says that 52% of all Rohingya women they have interviewed have been raped. And 80% of all refugees are women and children, because most of the time either men are killed or they're detained by the government. Her name is Rashida. She's also from Tolatali village. And she was raped when she tried to run away. Her baby was snatched from her hand and repeatedly thrown on the floor until the baby died. And this girl which is standing up, the taller one, is a 13-year-old victim of rape, lost both parents And we do a little help whoever we interviewed who are in terrible shape like her. So we provided this sewing machine to her, since Bangladesh economy is connected with the clothing industry. This girl on the left is also a 14-year-old who was also raped. So the camps inside Burma, the people who are in Burma, what is their situation? Nobody knows. However, about 15 years ago, sorry, not 15 years, my mistake, 5 years ago, 2012, in the southern part of the same area, the same thing happened. So you see in the background, they are not cloud, they are houses being burned. And you see in this box, this is the Burmese military. They are marching these people. There is a whole video available of them. They are marching them to camps. A New York Times visited this camp 2 years ago, and they called it the concentration camps of the 21st century. They are barbed, they must stay inside. And Professor Penny Green of London School of Economics have determined that they're given food at the level of Nazi concentration camps. And now, 2.5 months ago in July, the United Nations, which was the only program allowed to feed them, stopped feeding them because they were thrown out. But before this genocide and earlier campaigns of genocide, they were sort of living in apartheid state over there. For example, Burmese neighbors can be citizens. Rohingya neighbors who are always citizens, their citizenship was taken away. Buddhist neighbors can live in their own homes, and Rohingyas have to run around. Buddhist neighbors have one physician per 700 Buddhists. Rohingyas, when Doctors Without Borders were allowed, had 83,000 Rohingyas will have one physician available. Of course, Buddhist neighbors are not subject to systematic rape or sex, and here UN says 52% were raped. Buddhist neighbors can marry without permit. Rohingyas cannot do. If they do that, 10 years in prison. They can have as many children as they like. By law, Rohingyas were allowed to have only 2 children. They can go to school, but Rohingyas, the whole generation is absolutely illiterate because they are not allowed to go to school. Buddhist neighbors can travel freely. They need, Rohingya need a permit to travel, which is difficult to get hold of. They can have a job, they cannot, because once you are not citizen, how come you have a job? They can worship freely, and they are not allowed to worship freely. Now, how their situation inside Bangladesh? When you enter that area, you will see people are just sitting on the roadside like that, mostly women and children. And if there are organized camp, this is the state of organized camp. So you got a couple of bamboos and they put plastic sheets on it at the top, at the bottom, and this is it. You live essentially in the mud throughout that. And food aid is a major, major problem. There are very few distribution points for 1 million people. People normally spend half a day or more in line waiting for food distribution. And that's not enough for even for that day. And then they have to do the same thing again. And as a result, this photo, most photos were taken by me or my staff. This photo is from the media, came out just last week. You can see what's happening with children. So what needs to be done? So I'm coming to the conclusion aspect of it. There are 4 things which need to be done. First, it needs to be called by its right name. Right name is it's a genocide. Harvard University, Yale University, London School of Economics, everyone who have done scholarly research on that has determined it's a genocide. The recent governments don't want to use the word genocide, although French Prime Minister has said it, the Malaysian Prime Minister, French President has said it, And Malaysian, Turkish, and Bangladeshis have called it a genocide because there is a genocide treaty. Genocide treaty came into being after Holocaust when human rights resolution also came into being. Actually, United Nations in current form came into being to stop genocides. And they don't use the G word because that treaty, since they are lawyers came up with the treaty, and implication is that you have to stop it. And they don't want to take responsibility towards that. Number two, create safe zone. That's the only proposal on the table. What is the solution? And this is presented by Bangladeshi Prime Ministers. Create safe zone for Rohingyas inside Burma with UN peacekeepers until Rohingya citizenship rights are restored or Kofi Annan Commission things are implemented. This is a standard thing which is done in many, many cases. Number three, put tremendous amount of sanctions on Burma until it stops genocide and treats all people, including indigenous Rohingyas, as equal citizens with equal rights. And the last thing, not necessarily in that order, is airlift food, shelter, and medicine to Bangladesh. Bangladesh has enough food and enough medicine, and other people are willing to provide. Their main challenge is logistical, because there is a one tiny road, barely 2-lane, which goes through that whole area. And Bangladeshi individuals bringing good supplies and whatnot are blocking that area because, traffic hardly moves. So what they need is there is an international airport close by, Cox's Bazar, that supplies are loaded over there, downloaded there, and they have fleet of 10 helicopters. This is what I did for Haiti. When earthquake took place, I focused on campaigning of getting helicopters there. And when helicopters arrive in that logistically impossible situation, humanitarian aid was properly distributed. So Bangladeshis are doing a remarkable job of helping, but they need logistical help, and US can provide that type of help. Even 10 helicopters will take the staff, transport helicopters, meaning which has large capacity to transport things. They work day long and have 200-300 distribution points, so people are able to do that. So what can you do? Here are a few things. Realize the power of organizations. A genocide is taking place just like Rwanda, just like Cambodia, and the world is silent. So organizations need to organizationally adopt and push all governments and all representatives to use that word. So if your organization does not have a civic engagement committee, organize maybe a Burma committee or something. They are not just Muslims who are suffering there. Rohingyas are Muslims and Hindus, but there are Kachin people who are all actually Baptist Christians. There are 5 armed struggles going on in Burma for 5 years, some by Christians, some by Buddhists. Rohingyas were the only peaceful group, peacefully asking restoration of their citizenship, and that's all. So fight Islamophobia. The Islamophobic propaganda, which is unfortunately coined by Islamophobes in America, those are the things which are these indigenous people of Burma being accused of, that they are foreigners, they're trying to take over the country. Remember, Sharia is trying to replace the Constitution of the United States. That type of utter nonsense is imposed on those people who can barely have enough food to survive. Develop relationship with senators and congresspersons to push for those 4 demands which we have. Distribute Burma Task Force Action Alert. Well, that will require you to subscribe it first. And get your organization, churches, mosques, and temples to call it a genocide. Support Senate Bill 2060 and House Bill 4223, which puts sanctions on Burma. Don't buy. I want to warn people that each genocide is, there are 2 sides of a story. I mean, killing has no 2 sides of a story. In Rwanda, both sides were Christians, actually. But the people killing were blaming the people who were being killed. I mean, a mass atrocity on any crime whatsoever is not acceptable. So don't say there are two sides to this story. So Burma's strategy is to tell, oh, there are two sides to the story, and you don't know what happened. These Rohingya are ugly people, they're unclean people, they're dark-skinned people. Literally, Prime Minister, the leader of the Burmese government, Suu Kyi's spokesperson uses these terms. That look, who gonna rape them? Have you seen their faces? So from their perspective, they say they're ugly faces, dark-skinned faces, and Burmese will not even bother to rape them. That's the argument being pushed forward. And they did it to themselves, and they killed some. So they accused that some farm equipment was used to kill some police officers. Even if that is true, 1 million people losing their livelihood and tens of thousands getting killed because of that. So don't buy. There are no two sides when a genocide is taking place. If possible, donate to Burma Task Force, and remember to influence China and India on human rights issues. India, unfortunately, is being led by killers of Gandhi, and China and communist state, they are not properly doing a good job, and both of them are supporting the Burmese government, limiting the international action on it. For sources online, there is a Burmese Buddhist, Maung Zarni, M-A-U-N-G, Zarni, Z-A-R-N-I.net. That's why he's a Burmese Buddhist. And then Rohingyas are running RohingyaBlogger.com, and of course, BurmaTaskForce.org. Well, thank you so much. And I'm ready if there are any questions, Marilyn.
Okay. Thank you very much, Malik. I'm wondering, in regard to one of the questions here, can you help us understand the primary human rights issues in China and India?
Well, I'm talking in reference to Myanmar situation or Burma situation. India is not helping Bangladesh. They are forcing them to take it that these are terrorists. You know, every lot of countries in the world call opposition terrorist or something. It means everything is okay towards them. So Indian government is run by the Prime Minister Modi, who is a self-acclaimed member of Rashtriya Swayam Sangh, one of whose small-time leader was accused of killing Gandhi. And they are discussing expelling 40,000 Rohingyas. Their government has said they want to expel them from India for refugees there. Chinese government is playing double role. On one side, they controls Burmese economy. On the other side, they support some of the armed groups there. On Rohingya issues, they have provided some aid to Rohingya refugees, but mostly supporting Burma against any major international action against them. So I'm not talking human rights situations in those countries as much as how their foreign policy is ignoring the genocide and crimes against humanity which are being committed inside Burma.
You know, I'm wondering if you could speak a little about Aung San Suu Kyi and the relationship that you feel that is happening between the influence that she might have, is not using, and also the pressure that might be put on her from other Nobel Prize winners.
Well, it is very unfortunate to see from our eyes the demise of a person who stood up against the military, and she's the one who said that before she came into power, that Burmese military uses rape against the ethnic minorities. Now she doesn't say that. And it took her 2 months. Her house is just an hour away from that area. an hour flight, that is not walking distance. But it took her 2 months to go to that area. And just yesterday, report came out, a village where she visited and advised people not to attack anyone is the village. There are a lot of houses were burned down yesterday by the military and the extremists. It seems she has allied with the Burmese military, which essentially controls the country and runs the show. Commander-in-chief is not under the control of Suu Kyi. So I sometimes wonder if she herself is a open, quote unquote, open prisoner of the military herself, that she is unable to do. But most signs say that she herself had turned racist, because it is her spokesperson who stated that how can, haven't you seen these Rohingya women who can rape these ugly people? And she did not disown or dismiss that spokesperson.
Hmm.
So most of the Rohingya, most of the Nobel Peace Laureates have written to her, but unfortunately without any benefit.
You wonder if the Nobel Peace winners could actually go to Burma and to make a kind of pilgrimage. That would be, I think, pretty important.
I think it will be a good idea. Let's, Maureen, you and I work on it together to send some of these people. A couple of Nobel laureates are my friend, and you could use the offices through our leader, Karen Armstrong, to have some people take the message of compassion towards all to Burma.
Very good. I want to remind people there are comments coming in that there's also Mohammed, who works with Imam Malik, is on this chat, and he's supplying some links that you might be interested in. So that, have no fear, what you can do, you won't lose them. If you go to the very bottom of the chat box, you'll see there's a little sign there, and you click on it where it says more. You can save all of the information in this chat box directly to your computer. Imam Malik, would you talk a little bit about the two bills that you had in your slideshow, and exactly what might be a part of those bills?
The four asks which we have is call it a genocide and invoke genocide treaty. Second is to create safe zone for Rohingyas inside Burma, in the land they are thrown out of from, as Bangladeshi Prime Minister has called. And the third ask is to put full sanctions on Burma, to go back before the Suu Kyi era, to isolate them from these things. So both of these bills are partially address this third point. They talk about military sanctions and blockade, and some military generals who have businesses around the world on their assets and things of this nature. So it's a vehicle to put pressure on Burma, so this is not a resolution, these are bills. And bills, if they are enacted, become laws of the nation. And I think it's a good step, although they don't go far enough. So when you're talking to your senators and congressperson, it is important for you to actually talk to them about all the four asks and all the four demands, instead of just one of those.
Mm-hmm. So I'm also wondering if there are church associations, mosques, synagogues out there. What is best for them to do? I mean, certainly to support the bills is one thing, but we haven't talked about direct aid. And are there organizations who are accepting direct aid for the Rohingya, or is it just in the hands of the UN at this point? Or can pressure be put on the US government to provide food aid? And as you were talking about, helicopters for distribution. So I think that it would be important that we get some of that information out to people.
Sure. One of the major things is logistics, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Smaller entities are there, not a lot of not governmental organization, international organization are there. They are trying to provide help to these people, but that creates more of a logistic problem. More entities trying to do every bit themselves creates a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So my main recommendation is that U.S. has committed $36 million. That need to increase to $100 million. And main support U.S. should provide is logistical support through 10, 15 large transport helicopters to have more distribution points to compensate for the absence of infrastructure in that area. As I mentioned, a 2-lane road goes through that, and one lane incoming and one outgoing, and it's always clogged. So this is the main strategic importance we have. And organizations can write an organizational letterhead that it is a genocide, and logistical help can literally save lives in that area. That's number one. Number two, if you like to donate to Burma Task Force, because that's the only group in the whole world which is focused on stopping this genocide and has capacity to think strategically and push these resolutions and whatnot. Third thing is that if you like to give charity directly to the people, there is an organization called BRAC, B-R-A-C. B as in boy, R as in Robert, A as in apple, C as in cat, BRAC. This is a Bangladeshi organization, and by the way, it is known internationally is one of the best run relief organization and development organization in the world. They have 800 employees serving in that area. You can support them. Second support, I would say Doctors Without Borders. They are the only one who are taking essentially 90% burden of healthcare needs of these people. You can provide them. But in my list, logistical help gonna save tremendous amount of life. People are literally dying right now as we speak of.
Okay. I want to encourage people to use the chat box and put your questions in there. And if you want to talk directly to Imam Malik, please let us know, and we can turn on your video and microphone. I'm just kind of scanning down here to make certain that we're getting all of the questions answered. Mohammed, I am going to ask you to turn on your mic, and Mohammed and I are having a little chat between ourselves, and so he thinks that there's a question that Imam Malik should be asked, and so Mohammed, can you turn on your mic and ask the question that you're referring to?
Oh, sure. The question was, and I think there's some interest in this, is regarding how to raise awareness at universities and business places.
I think business places are normally businesses have a program. If they don't have, they need to start a program in which they match donations. So they can say that, okay, we're collecting donations for BRAC or Doctors Without Borders and everyone who's going to contribute to this genocide. So first thing is awareness. So you get information from the sources, or there are a lot of articles coming out in mainstream. Post them, share with the internal emails, and have conversation with the administration to match dollar to dollar. Canadian government, by the way, if anybody from Canada here, they are matching dollar to dollar. So doubling the impact of your charities for Rohingyas at this moment. So this can be done in there. Campuses do a tremendous job. Campuses, I think there need to be coalitions which need to focus on there is a genocide going on and genocide need to be stopped. Many times people are inclined to give some money and consider the responsibility is over. Most of the time that's good enough, but not in the case of a genocide. Genocide needs to be recognized as a genocide, so that requires educational programming. And we have people who can come from here or in another city to make presentations. Second thing is that if it's a genocide, what are you doing to stop it? As a human being, you have a responsibility to reach out to whoever you think has more influence or represents you. And the third thing is you can have a calling day, and you can have a campaign day, or you can have a Rohingya day in your campus. There's a whole list of things which you can do.
I think those are really excellent suggestions, and I know that we have a student from Boston, a high school student, on this call, and I know that she's here because she wants to do something, and this is a great opportunity, I think, with some of the resources that you've provided. You know, Malik, I'm wondering, what can our One America Registry and Coalition do? We have a number of groups, and it almost seems that we should bring them all together and have them get involved in this campaign the same way that we should try and get all of the 450 religious organizations that are part of the charter involved in this genocide and stopping genocide.
I think, Marilyn, I fully agree with you and will support any initiative like that. Because in America at this moment, some senator and congressmen are speaking out, not everyone is speaking out. Newspapers are treating it as though it happened 2 years ago, now it's over, although it's ongoing. So I think some people are calling this a Muslim issue, which I absolutely offended by that. Genocide is always an issue of humanity. It's never an issue of people being killed. It's like calling Rwanda is a Christian issue because both sides there are Christians involved, or calling Cambodia a Buddhist issue because both sides Buddhists are involved, or calling it a communal issue because in Burma there are Buddhist and Muslim. That will be all wrong definition. We need to come to humanity level, which is a common cause. So I would appreciate if something like that comes into being. I'm aware of an organization called Jacob, Jews Against Something, but of whatever is happening in Burma. So there is a rabbi who leads that in New York. I think if there are some Jews here on this webinar, look up. It's called Jacob. Unfortunately, I don't remember the full name. It started with Jews Against Something Burma. So that we need to have a broader coalition to raise, number one, awareness of the genocide is taking place, and number two, work in a bigger way to stop it. And once we are doing the education, right now the number on this webinar, as it says, I don't know whether it's accurate or not, says 15 participants. Remember, Marilyn, when we have done webinars like that on Islamophobia, we had several hundred people on it.
We did.
So it tells us not that what we are not doing, where it tells us that there is not general awareness of something of this nature. So if all those people who are part of One America Coalition are approached to join in and support, of course, some of them are, focus on domestic civil rights issues and issues like that, but they can always speak up at least once, if not always. So I'm in full support of something like that, and maybe we should use the recording of this webinar to actually have a higher level of circulation through these groups, and maybe we can do another webinar for it.
I think so. We do have, thank you, Mohammed, again for putting up additional resources. And we do have another comment here. How do we get new age legislation for heart and soul community services with a basic guaranteed income with single payer for all by way of churches, spiritual groups, environmental groups, caring activist groups, and Veterans for Peace in the United States? Wow, that's long. And maybe we could break it down to the first part. How do we get some legislation that is geared towards heart and soul and offering community services? Well, I'm not sure exactly how you'll go about answering that, but let's give it a try, and maybe between the two of us, we'll figure it out.
I'm not sure, but any legislation you want to do, you need to write a one paragraph so it has clarity in it, and then approach your representative that this is what you like to get passed, and can you initiate that? If they agree to initiate, their legislative director is going to help you improve the wording and whatnot. And then they can write a dear colleague letter to rest of the members of House of Representatives. And if there are 10, 12 people who sign up, then they can present that as a resolution or as a bill to the House.
Malik, are there individual senators or Congress people who are really committed to the bills that we've talked about, and certainly to name genocide against the Rohingya?
Unfortunately, we have several of them who speak once in a while, but unfortunately, we don't have a champion. If one congressperson or one senator just decide this is a cause I'll remain focused on, they will become a champion and things will move. You know, there are thousands of bills in House and Senate which are presented every year, and most of those do not go anywhere. So good thing is Senator McCain, Senator Durbin are on board on these efforts. They started supporting another effort a couple of months ago that didn't go anywhere, but that was a resolution. This one is a bill, and it has some teeth to it this time. So I think people who are here, if they really work with their representative and they become a champion, then these things will really start moving. So at this moment, this cause doesn't have champions. I mean, we all should be champions of this cause, but champions from Hollywood, champion from Senate, champion from sports figures, that is which is missing. And that's what I was hoping, Marilyn, if we're able to get a whole lot of other people join in, as your webinars in the past have, then somebody might figure out, hey, you know, this guy is my neighbor and she can make things move.
This is a good opportunity for the people who are on this call to do some brainstorming and write in the chat box their ideas. And I, as a person who's involved with the charter, I think that, you know, we can certainly try our hardest, and maybe I should say our damnedest, to get this moving forward and to get more people involved. And I think you're absolutely right. The first and most critical thing is that we get people to understand there's a genocide, and that we have been so lax in the past with Bosnia, Kosovo, Rwanda. We've seen these genocides and we have not named them. And just hundreds of thousands of people have lost their lives within our own lifetime. And so this is something I think that's a responsibility for all of us to do.
Okay, so what we could do is, Marilyn, I appreciate your comment. I think those were good comments to conclude this webinar. But let's decide to talk to each other sometime today to think of next steps, what we can do together on this.
Okay, that's great. And Melissa has written a comment here about sharing the webinar and wondering if we could share the recording too. Definitely, it takes us a little bit more time to get both of the features, the video part of this and separating it into a recording. The recordings we usually put on our SoundCloud, where we have a channel. But everyone who signed up for this webinar, and usually 1/3 of the people who sign up for a webinar show up for it. And so we always make certain that we get the information out to other people. And so, you know, thank you so much. And I know that I have omitted a couple of the comments. I want to recognize that, but they are really solely based on another effort, which is very noteworthy, but not really a part of the conversation that we're having here. So I do want to acknowledge that. And thank you so much, Imam Malik. And we will get together and we will have an action plan. And that action plan, every person who's on this call is invited to be a part of an ongoing conversation. And it might be just meeting on Zoom, but certainly send us your ideas. I think that's really important, and we'll move forward. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you all. Good day.
Goodbye.